Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
I sat down with Congressman Rick Crawford via phone, and this is what he had to say about DACA and some other stuff. Take a listen. Congressman Rick Crawford on the line. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been kind of a busy week. A lot of stuff has gone on. Let's kind of start with DACA. Do you want to start with DACA and kind of tell us what you thought about that? The president saying, "Hey, look, in 6 months, Congress has 6 months to act to try to fix what Obama did." What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of telling about where some of these folks in Washington are with regard to DACA when they throw a fit about anything President Trump does, but they are willing to give President Obama a pass on virtually everything. And even by his own admission, DACA was unconstitutional. He acknowledged that before he ever did it. It's been widely recognized that he exceeded his executive authority in doing implementing DACA. So, but it's become sort of institutionalized. So you're taking something away from people. Mm-hmm. How they got it is less important than the fact that they have it, and in their minds, it's something you're taking away. And so, that's the Obama legacy. There's a lot of mess to clean up.
Yeah, I don't even understand what. I mean, you have these folks who are here in violation of the law, but it seems like before DACA, I don't remember hearing that these children, or they're called children, some of them are not, were even being targeted for deportation. So you're exactly right. It seems like Obama just created this institution in a way that they do feel like they are losing something.
Right, and so look, nobody was targeting these young people. They have tied this whole DACA mantra up with the DREAM Act. Well, the DREAM Act failed, and that was the effort by a handful of folks, the Gang of Eight, over in the Senate, to do a comprehensive immigration reform, and of course there was an amnesty provision in there. And since the DREAM Act wasn't passed, then the president said, "Well, I'll show you what I'll do. I'll just go ahead and do it myself." And then he implemented this policy of deferred action for childhood arrivals. Well, I mean, look, I understand we should not penalize a child, that was sort of unwittingly, unknowingly brought into the country. They don't have any choice in the matter. Nor should we punish those children because of President Obama's unconstitutional actions. So, and neither should the rest of us suffer because the president may or may not have taken unconstitutional action. That's not to say that we're suffering as a result of, immigrant children. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if this is unconstitutional as it applies to our immigration laws, which the president acknowledged that he did, then is his unconstitutional activity limited only to immigration, or did he do some other things that were questionable legally and constitutionally? And I would argue, yeah, he probably did. And so that's when the rest of us really start to feel pressure because we had a president that couldn't get anything done legislatively, so he just took it upon himself to do things, to essentially legislate from executive order, and that is decidedly unconstitutional.
We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. Do you think there's any chance that we actually address the immigration problems that we have by securing the border first and then deciding, what to do with those who are here in violation of our laws?
Well, I think that before we ever started talking about a border wall, I was talking about the border security as a priority before there was ever any further discussion about how we revamp our immigration law. We can't get our arms around an immigration problem if we don't stop the flow of the problem. So I mean, if the ship is sinking, you got to find the hole and plug that, and then figure out how you're going to bail the water out. You just, my point is that you can only just take on so much water. And so I think what we're seeing under this president is, we've changed the rules of engagement along the border. I've been down to the border. For folks who don't know, I've been down there. I've talked to the Border Patrol. The agents down there under the Obama administration were absolutely afraid to do their jobs, not because they feared the immigrants, but because they feared any retribution that they might receive as a result of stopping the immigrants from crossing. And it wasn't just about, well, I might lose my job. It was about, I might go to jail.
Right.
If I do things what historically was by the book, but they might go to jail. And so my point is that these agents were literally taking a beating before they would do anything to defend themselves, because they were afraid that if they did, that they would not only lose their job, but could potentially be thrown in jail. And that's no way to secure the border. And so, we've got a new president, and you've seen a precipitous decline in the number of border crossings since January 20th. And so we've seen a new approach to how we enforce our laws along the border. And that has made a whale of a difference just in and of itself. So border security is critical. Should we have the wall? Yeah, but there should be doors in the wall. And we should be able to have a say on who comes through those doors.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And look, as I've said before, I don't lock my doors at night because I hate the people on the outside. I lock my doors at night because I love the people on the inside.
That's exactly right.
And, why we don't have that perspective about our own house collectively, what we call the United States, is beyond me. But it's not a statement of hate for us to love our citizens. It's just absolutely not. No more than it's a statement of hate for me to love my family so much so that I lock our doors at night to protect them.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And so it has devolved into this political rhetoric, and if for some reason you support border security, then the other side just automatically declares that you're racist. Well, guess what? Mexico is engaged in aggressive border security on their southern border for the very same reason that we are. And so if it's okay for Mexico to enforce border security on their southern border, why is it not okay for the United States to do the same? And when Vicente Fox weighs in on this, as if to say, the president is doing something wrong by rescinding an unconstitutional order, and that all these quote-unquote dreamers that Vicente Fox essentially encouraged to come across our border illegally and take up residence in the United States, he has no standing at all to be able to make those kinds of assertions, say the things that he said about our president and about our country, given the fact that he's been complicit in this during his tenure as president of Mexico. So I would just assume that he's, stayed out of our business and let us take care of the United States.
Yeah. And, all those leftists out there that do want open borders, and they do, throw those charges of hate our way, they are locking their doors at night. I mean, that's what's so funny about this. And they just...
Well, that's just the duplicity of these liberals is that it's do as I say, not as I do. And, so they like to have armed security around them in many cases, and they certainly have locks on their doors. But that's good for them. But the rest of us are racist if we do that, or, we're bitter clingers, if we cite the Second Amendment as our constitutional right to, self-protection. Heaven forbid we ought to have a gun in our house. But it's okay to have armed guards outside of your locked door to make sure you sleep soundly at night.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of hypocrisy there. Also this week, we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. Also this week, we have this debt ceiling negotiations, where, of course, the headlines that I saw, were about Donald Trump, going the Democrats' way on the debt ceiling, doing a shorter version than the GOP leadership wanted. Now, I've heard several reactions to this, just watching social media and watching the media. I've heard some say that they're worried. This makes them worried about Donald Trump. You know, hey, where's he going with this? I've also heard some say, and I think this is a fair criticism, that they're not too upset by this because they figured that the GOP would have eventually blinked anyway and, you know, done something similar. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, look, I understand the motivation of the president in sort of the sense of frustration there that he hasn't gotten everything he wanted. He hasn't, you know, some of the, you know, the really the centerpiece of his campaign.
So hang on, let me stop you there. So you think that part of the reason that he did this is because he is frustrated?
Well, I think we're all frustrated, and so I'm not gonna exclude the president from that. I think we're all frustrated with, but there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that have contributed to that frustration that maybe the casual observer might not be aware of. And you know, but the American people aren't necessarily concerned with the minutia of the inside baseball that takes place in Washington. They just want some results. And so, heck, I'm frustrated. I get frustrated because I've been working on, you know, legislation since I got here that I've taken, you know, a lot of time to write carefully, and we can't get our day in court, as it were. You know, it's frustrating to me that it's such a process to try and get, you know, an opportunity to get a bill on the floor that you know, we believe would make a measurable difference in the quality of life in this country. And that's frustrating to me as a legislator. So not knowing all the ins and outs of what's taking place here in Washington, the American people, the average voter, would look at this and go, they can't get anything done, and they're frustrated. And I am right there with them on that. The president is no different. He's a human being. We don't agree on everything, but I think we can agree that we're probably equally frustrated, and maybe for different reasons, maybe for the same reasons, but we have a different set of responsibilities. Ultimately, together, we are to, you know, our responsibilities essentially are the same. We have a different role in how we pursue that and how we exercise that responsibility. But ultimately, I think that we should be equally yoked in that goal. But it's frustrating because of the process and how we achieve it. And I think the president's just like, hey, he throws up his hands and says, if y'all can't get it done, here's what I'm going to do to break a log jam. And so I think what you're seeing is the expression of frustration on his part. You're seeing the frustration on the part of leadership, for example, you know, Paul Ryan, who may have, I think, pardon my French, the crappiest job in the world, and that is to try and steer
Well, I saw you with another, it made me lose my mind. Shot you with my 38, and now I'm doing time, and you put me here.
All right, folks, hey, this is Johnny Cash Friday here. We're going to get back with our interview with Congressman Rick Crawford from earlier today. We got to go to break, though. Enjoy the music. Back in a minute. 59799 on this Johnny Cash Friday as we continue with the second half of our interview with Congressman Rick Crawford from earlier today. Enjoy.
And so I think what you're seeing is the expression of frustration on his part. You're seeing the frustration on the part of leadership, for example, you know, Paul Ryan, who may have, I think, pardon my French, the crappiest job in the world. And that is to try and steer a group of legislators who could probably easily constitute 5 separate parties. You know, we've got a huge diversity of thought within the Republican Party, and particularly in the House. And so, trying to get your arms around this magic number of 218 to move something that reflects the conservative principles that we really were sent here to reflect is difficult. But what underlies that is the fact that 99% is not a passing grade anymore. And I get frustrated because I think as Republicans, we have abdicated the belief that, in intellectual honesty. You know, we used to chastise the Democrats for just, blind, circle the wagons and follow along. And they're not intellectually honest. They just let Pelosi or Obama or whoever call the shots for them, and they're not intellectually honest. But we need to be intellectually honest ourselves. And just because we have a Republican president in the White House now doesn't mean that we just throw away everything we've talked about for the last, 50 years. And then what about President Reagan's 11th commandment? Speak no ill of another Republican. I know we're going to have internal disputes, but when we walk out the door, we're all on the same team. And so it frustrates me that we have the kind of open derision of our fellow team members that we see that at the top level in the media, that we have members of Congress that will go out and malign their colleagues on the same team. We see the president does that frequently. Instead of going after Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, he goes after Jeff Flake. I'm going to tell you that I don't agree with Jeff Flake on a whole lot of stuff, but I don't think it serves any purpose to single out a member of the Senate or a member of the House and openly attack them, and you don't do that on the other side. I mean, instead you go out and you make a deal with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. There's the frustration. It's not that the deal necessarily wasn't one that we might not have arrived at on our own.
Yeah.
It's just that the circumstances are such that this behavior of members in the House, members in the Senate, John McCain, for example, and Chuck Schumer, my goodness, he can't open his mouth without taking a shot at Republicans. We're all racists, we're all homophobes, we're all sexist. We're every bad thing he can put into a single sentence as a baseline. So that's what we have to work from.
Yeah.
So this discourse up here does lend itself to frustration, and so the president is not immune from that. And I think he acted in frustration. I think it was a tactical maneuver. I don't know that it fits into a long-term strategy, but and if it does, I'm not sure what that strategy is.
Yeah, that was my next question. Will the that's the question is if this was some sort of tactical move, are the Democrats going to come off something in the future that they're passionate about, to get to a compromise? And I think history shows that the answer is no. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, I think history also shows that it doesn't matter what these Democrats in Washington do today, because they won't be held to that standard tomorrow. And the media will not hold them to account on anything they do today is about today. And so, the inconsistency that we see, look, I have a voting record that I have to account for. And, people ask me, hey, how come you voted on this, 5 years ago, and then you changed on this? Or you're a flip-flopper. Well, it's like the old saying, I used to think that chocolate milk came from brown cows, and then when I found out that it didn't, I flip-flopped, changed my opinion because I found that that wasn't the case. Well, Democrats, it doesn't matter. They can change their opinion day to day, and then they can say, well, my position has evolved. And the media says, okay, that's good enough explanation. That's a good enough explanation for the mainstream media, for a Democrat's position changing from one day to the next, but it's not good enough for anybody else. And the point I'm trying to make is this deal that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi made with the president is not a benchmark or precedent-setting event that will absolve any other Democrat from working with the administration. I guarantee you they will be in lockstep the next time the president goes to them with the deal and they say, heck no, we're not going to deal with you. There'll not be another Democrat that'll deviate from that. Mm-hmm. They will be held to that standard because that's the standard of the day. And that's how they work.
Wow.
And we're different. I mean, we try to, at least, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, at least on our side, are trying to maintain a true north and trying to, be consistent with a set of principles that we think reflect conservative values. But on the other side is it's a sliding scale of values that are, very, very ill-defined and nebulous at best. and you don't know what they are from one day to the next.
That's really, really good. I mean, I really appreciate your, characterization, and to hear your firsthand account of what you think about all this. And I definitely do think, there is a lot of frustration on both sides. Real quick, before we run out of time, obviously we've got Hurricane Harvey and the devastation and the relief effort now, and that's going to take some sort of congressional action. But then we probably on Monday or Tuesday, we're going to be dealing with the fallout of Hurricane Irma. So what do you know about all of these situations?
Okay, well, we passed our package, sent it to the Senate. The Senate's tacking on some provisions and sent it back to us on Harvey. And one of those, I believe, is the short-term debt ceiling issue. And look, the reality is nobody likes to vote for a debt ceiling. Nobody wants to do that. So why do we do it? Put ourselves in a position of having to do it every 3 months. If we want to do that, then that's fine, but we ought to get something out of it. If we're going to have to raise the debt ceiling every 3 months to go and take this ugly vote every 3 months, then at the very least, give me an opportunity to put my spending limitation amendment on the floor to reflect the desires of the American people to fundamentally reform the way Washington spends money as a percentage of GDP. So we cap spending as a percentage of GDP, and that would put us at least on a course to get our arms around this runaway spending in Washington. And here's the reason that I'm passionate about this, because these natural disasters are going to occur to one degree or another every year. We've had at least 3, disaster declarations since I've been in office. What we call a 100-year flood are now about a 3-year flood. So we have it all the time. These disasters are going to happen. And so it's off budget, and there's no way we can do it. And there's no way we can sustain this type of off-budget deficit spending over time unless we get our arms around the fundamental mechanism to force Congress to spend money based on what we have as a reflection of our total economy. And we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. We're going to pat ourselves on the back and say, look, American people stepped up and we delivered relief to Harvey and Irma victims, as we should, just like we should have done and did in Katrina and Sandy and other disasters that happen around the nation. But how long can we do this on the current path without some sort of change in how we spend money? And if we're going to be forced to go to the floor and take a debt ceiling vote, an ugly vote that we don't want to do, but we have to, then at least give us the courtesy of expressing our opinion on how that money is spent over time. And I think a spending limitation is really the answer, a spending limitation amendment to the Constitution, because, people make the argument that a balanced budget amendment sounds good, except that you might have to actually raise revenues to achieve balance. Okay, that's fine. We'll just cap spending as a percentage of GDP, and I'd be satisfied to do that too. But fundamentally, we have to change what's going on in Washington, or we're on. Look, $20 trillion in debt. President Trump is not going to be any different than President Obama or President Bush when it comes to deficit spending if we don't stop it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Congress has the power of the purse, and I certainly hope that the debt starts to come back up in the conversation among Republicans more often. We did used to talk about it a whole lot. We did. Let me qualify that statement you just made just real quickly. Congress has the power of the purse. That is a common misconception, in that we originate spending bills in the House. But ultimately, it's a joint checking account. The Senate has to sign off, and the President has to sign off. So all 3 levers have to be aligned for that spending to take place. It's everybody's responsibility in this model of governance that we have, and we originate those spending bills in the House. But I would liken this to a joint checking account that requires 3 signatures. So we can't do it unilaterally, nor can the President do it unilaterally. And so that's why we have to have that fundamental mechanism underlying that spending process. I like it. Congressman Rick Crawford, I appreciate it so much, and it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All righty. Have a great weekend.